Hello YouTube, this is Umozo3. So we are now at lesson 4 of our Java tutorial. I'm making a set of YouTube videos that sort of demonstrates my knowledge of the Java programming language. In lesson 0, we downloaded an integrated development environment, a software application that allows us to write Java code. In lesson 1, we talked about printing statements in Java and also why we would use comments, talking about single and multi-line comments. In lesson 2, we introduced arithmetic expressions and figured out how to do some basic mathematical operations in Java. In lesson 3, we basically introduced variables and talked about why it's important to be able to store values in Java and use them later on in our code, talking a little bit more about ints and doubles and how we can convert between them depending on what we're trying to do mathematically. What I want to do in this video is talk a little bit more about variables and data types and variable declarations, how to round numbers, how to change the values of variables. And there's really not a good short name for this video, but it is going to be a helpful video for understanding a few more paradigms and a couple of more strategies and techniques that we have at our fingertips for when we deal with numbers and basic data in Java. So what we can do is go back into this class that we've been working in, and you can see this code. This code is from the previous video, so feel free to click on the link in the description if you want to review what we've talked about previously. But for now, with each video, I'm just going to assume that your understanding is, good enough up to the previous video. So what we could do, again, we could talk about something like int w equals 25. So what this does is it has the code above has two purposes. And so the first one is declaration. So it basically declares space in Java memory for an integer called w. Okay, and the second thing that it does is it gives w an initial value. So a starting value to point to, a starting value of 25. Okay, so those are the two things that line of code does. We can also elect to split up declaration and initialization onto different lines. So alternatively, we could say something like int b equals 10. Okay, so this, here declaration happens on one line and initialization happens on the other line. You can't print the value of a variable before you initialize it. So if you try printing the value of b when all you've told Java is that you want to keep track of an integer called b, you can see it already underlines it in red. So this IDE already underlines it in red and tells us, hey, you might have an issue compiling this program as it currently is because you're asking me to fetch a value that, where a variable doesn't have a value yet. It says variable b might not have been initialized. And so that would be the problem with trying to print b here. And so what you would do is you basically would cut and paste this line of code until after you've initialized the value at least one time. We said that variables can also take on values that are not their initial values. So if you said b equals b mod 5, okay, so now what this would do is it would take the original value of b, which is 10. It would say, what is the remainder when I divide 10 by 5? Well, since that's a perfect division, the remainder would be 0. And so that's actually what would be printed down here. And so if I run this line of code, we never did anything with the 25. We never printed that or anything. So we should just expect a simple 0 when we run the output. And indeed, that's what we see down here in the back. So that's the 0 that we get here. And so we can talk about the difference between declaration and initialization. So I just want you to be familiar with the fact that we can either do that on the same line or do that on two different lines. You can redefine the value of a variable as many times as you want, but you can't initialize it more than once. So if you said something like int p equals 10, int p equals 17, this is an issue because you already told Java that you're going to keep track of an integer called p. So it says variable p is already defined. So the point of this is to say you can, redefine as many times as you want. I would say you can initialize as many times as you want, but you're only picking an initial value once. You can change it as many times as you want, but declaring it in space, declaration, only happens one time. And then, so you only have to write int one time, only write the data type of the variable once, right? So that got a little long here, but You know, so then the same thing with doubles. So if you said double f, okay, and you said f equals, you know, 28, and then you could say f equals 3, and then f equals 15. So you can see, well, this is another thing we talked about in a previous video. What am I doing here? I'm assigning an integer over and over again to a double. Is that okay? Yes, because we said that an integer is automatically converted to a floating point number if it's assigned to a double. So this is a declaration, one-time declaration, you could say. And then this would be initialization, and then this would be, you could say, a reassignment. So, you know, you change the value after you already set it once. And then this would be another reassignment. And so now if you say System.out.println of f, would it print 28? No. Would it print 3? No. Would it print 15? No. It would print 15.0 because it was declared as a floating point number, and so that's what we would get here. And of course, if we wanted to print just 15, you could apply an int. You could explicitly or non-automatically, right? You think about explicit being a manual. It's manually forcing f into an int. So it's saying, okay, instead of printing 28.0, I just want you to print 28. It doesn't change the data type of f. It just changes the data type of the output here. So now, instead of printing the instead of printing the 15.0, we just print the 15. And so that's what we see here. Another thing that I'd like to say is that we can also have multiple variable declarations on the same line. So what you can do is you can you know, you can initialize multiple variables on the same line if and only if they have the same data type. Okay, they have the same data type. So that line got a little long again. Let me stretch that out. Okay, so let's take a look here. In A equals 2, B equals 9, C equals 10. So this basically creates 3 integers, A, B, and C, and gives all 3 of them initial values. And you can always change them at this point if you want. So what if you said C equals A and B equals C? So what is this line of code does? Well, this reassigns C from 10 to 2. And then what does this line do? This reassigns B, you know, from 9 to, well, what is C now? So 9 to 2. Right, because C took on 2, so now B is going to take on 2. So now if you do System.out.println of B plus C, you know, instead of 19, we should get 4. And so we can go ahead and check our math here, and that's what we see on the output. That's what we see on the console. So that's you know, that you can reassign variables, you know, and you can do all those kinds of things. But the point is that you can have multiple variable declarations on the same line. So we could do the same things with doubles. So double D1 equals 2. Right, so really 2.0, remember, and then D2 equals 6. So what if you said System.out.println? Let's try this one. What if you said D1 plus int of D2? What would this print? Let's think about the output here. So D1 is 2.0. So you can see I'm going to highlight that. So this would be the 2.0 here, right? Because we said that if an integer is passed into a double, then the integer is automatically converted to its floating point representation. So you have a 2.0 plus a 6. But remember, we said that Java prefers, it automatically converts, you know, the integer to the floating point number. So it's not, it wouldn't convert this 2.0 to a 2. It would convert this 6 to a 6.0. So it would be 2.0 plus 6.0. So we would expect 8.0 here. Okay, we would expect 8.0 for that, and that's what we see. But if you apply the int to the entire expression, you know, D1 plus D2, so then it would be 2.0 plus 6.0, which is 8.0, and then converts the 8.0 to an int, then we get the integer form. So then we just get 8, and that's what we would expect here. What we can also do is think about switching the value of 2 variables. So how do we switch the values of 2 variables, A and B? So you say int A equals 5, B equals 3. What happens if we say B equals A and A equals B? What's the problem with this approach? What if we just swap them? The problem here is that B will take A's old value, so B is assigned from 3 to 5, which is good, that's fine. And now we want to get A from 5 to 3. So we say, okay, well, A, just take B's value. The problem is that B has already been assigned to A, so A is just going to get reassigned to itself. So A is assigned from, what would it be? From 5 to 5, which is bad. The solution here is to have a third variable. And so what you would do is you would have a third variable. And what happens is the third variable is going to keep track of the old A or B. And it doesn't matter which one you do, but you need a third variable to keep track of information that you would otherwise lose. So let's go ahead and reassign A to 5 and B to 3. So remember, we're just redefining those variables, just setting them back to what they were originally. So I'm saying A is going to be 5 again, and B is going to be 3 again. And what you're going to do is you're going to create a third variable. So we're going to just declare it first. We're going to say int c. So this is a declaration of a third variable. Sometimes it's called a temp variable, a temporary variable. Okay, because you're using it for an auxiliary, a main purpose with A and B. So what you're going to do is you're going to say C equals A. So C will keep track of A's old value. Well, you can do it in either direction. Okay, so let's say C equals B. It doesn't really matter. So C will keep track of B's old value, and then you're going to say B equals A. Okay, so now that B's old value is saved, B can now take A's old value. Okay, and now we cannot say A equals B. So A equals B, this line is an error. This line is bad. This is what we did earlier, right? Because this just reassigns A to itself. So instead you say A equals C. So now A takes B's old value, okay? And so now if you try printing System.out.println of A minus B, well, what would this originally print? This originally printed 2, but now that we switched A and B so that A is 3 and B is 5, we should expect -2. And so if we run this code, now hopefully I've taught you, now that you understand the paradigm, the approach for switching the value of two variables. So again, now instead of getting 2, we get -2 because A took on B's old value and B took on A's old value. There are 2 more things I'll show you how to do in this video. And the first one is rounding a double to the nearest integer. So if you are at a number like 3.2, if you're less than 0.5, you want to run down to the lower integer. If you're higher than 0.5, like you're at 0.8 or something, you want to round up to the next higher integer. In order to do that, what you need to do is add 0.5 to the double and convert that result to an integer. So let me show you what I mean. So you're going to do double D1 equals, and then you could say, let's do, for example, one that'll round down. So for example, round down example. Let's create a variable called round down example. And we'll say something like 3.44. So that's supposed to round down to 3. So, so we want this to round down to 3. So what we're going to do is you would say System.out.println. You would do the integer form of whatever 0.5 is plus that number. So 3.44 plus 5 is 3.94. So 3.44 plus 5 is 3.94. But this is, int form is sent back down to 3. Okay, so you just add 0.5, and that just it would indicate whether or not you spill over to the next integer, right? Because if you're 62% of the way there and you add 50 more percentage points, you spill over. But if you're only 49% of the way there and you add 50 percentage points, then you don't spill over and you'd round back down. So this hopefully would round to 3, and then now we can see another example. So round up example. Let's say we want to round up to 22. So we would have 21.73. And then you could say System.out.println of int 0.5 plus round up example. Those are just variable names. And then of course here, so 21.73 plus 0.5 is 22. 22.23, right? And then the int form is sent back down to 22. So we're expecting 3 and 22, and those are the numbers that we get. The last thing I'll show you how to do in this video is to do basically a simple increment of a variable. So let's say you have int y equals 4, okay? How do we add 1 to the value of y? There are 3 ways to do this. Either you do y equals y plus 1. So this is basically, this is the longhand form, okay? You can also do y plus equals 1, okay? So this is the shorthand form. Or you can do y plus plus. So this is called an increment form. So we can try well, let's try out all 3 of them. So we can do y equals y plus 1, and then System.out.println of y, and then we expect 5 here because it took y's original value of 4. 4 plus 1 is 5, and so 5 is here. And then we could do y plus equals 1. Again, we're incrementing it, so here we expect 6. And then we could do y plus plus, and then here we would go ahead and expect 7. And you can do this, it doesn't have to be for adding. You can do it for subtraction too. So if you do y minus minus, this would do system, and then if you say System.out.println of y, we should be back down to y. And you can do it with multiplication too. So you could do y times equals 3. So this means take y's original value, multiply it by 3, and reassign that result to y. So then this would say System.out.println of y, and here we should get 18. So what do? We take 4, we increment it, get 5. We increment it, get 6. Increment it, get 7. Decrement it, get 6. Multiply it by 3 and get 18. And so we should get 5, 6, 7, 6, 18. And that's exactly the output that we get. So in this video, I just wanted to give you a little bit more information about multiple variable declarations. How do we initialize multiple variables at the same time? What is really the difference between declaring and initializing a variable? How can we quickly reassign the value of a variable? How do we switch the values of 2 variables? How do we interchange them? How do we round a double to the nearest integer? So hopefully you're familiar with these things. And in the next video, we'll be able to start talking a little bit more about strings. We'll start talking about words and sentences and characters and things like that. From UMills03, thanks for watching, and please subscribe.